Anything Ghost, number 319. Welcome to Anything Ghost. My name is Lex Wall. Anything Ghost has been around since 2006, and it's a place where people share their personal experiences with ghosts or local ghost legends, and I read them to you. If you have a story to share, send it to Lex at anythingghost.com. Have a great lineup of stories for you in episode number 319, including a story from Rod Mitsui, who's done some intros for us in the past. So stick around for 319. And we're going to start things off with the story from Rod, the one I alluded to in the intro, and he's in Los Angeles. Phone calls from the grave. We have seen movies and TV shows featuring people getting phone calls from beyond the grave. And I know one person who has had several experiences with these. I'll call him Daryl for the story. He's about 65 years old now. I met him around 1990. And among a number of shared interests between us, Daryl has had a great interest in ghosts and ghost stories. He read extensively on the subject, and much more than I have. He's a big fan of the Hans Holzer books, and the writings of Elliot O'Donnell, for example. His reading suggestions have been very educational over the years, and he claims he is psychic, and has been since he was a child, when he would see ghosts in different places all the time. By his definition, I am a psychic as well, but I don't call myself that. I just think these are natural perceptions that everyone has. The topic of ghost phone calls bothers me, because I'd never thought of that as a real thing until I spoke to Daryl about it. His experiences were extremely unpleasant overall. Partially, this is because he received 2 phone calls from a close friend who had died in the early 1980s in a very bad car crash. One night, this friend had driven his car off a cliff, basically. He had a passenger in the car, a girlfriend, who was almost completely unharmed, to the degree that many people could not believe it. But somehow, as the car crashed into the ground, she was thrown clear, and he was not. The car itself was thoroughly crushed. A few weeks after this friend's funeral, strange things started to happen. A couple of times, when Daryl was driving home from work, he passed by his friend's house and saw for a brief moment the ghost of the car sitting in the driveway. He saw this twice. Both times, he saw the car only for a moment, and after he blinked, it was suddenly gone. Of course, the car had been totally destroyed, so that was impossible, and he knew that he had been seeing a vision of some kind. And then, the first phone call came. "It's John," the voice on the phone said. "Daryl, we should get together next week and have lunch. I haven't seen you in such a long time." "We can't get together for lunch, John. You're dead." "That's ridiculous. I'm alive. Stop playing around. Let's have lunch, seriously." Daryl started to get upset at this point. "We can't, John. We can't have lunch together because you are dead." And Daryl hung up the phone. Apparently, he had been talking to a version of John who believed he was still alive. Another phone call came in about a week, and the conversation was almost the same. This time, John was more insistent that he was alive and pleaded with Daryl to meet him for lunch. Once again, he had to clarify. "John, we can't get together for lunch because you are dead." This time, he heard a sigh and a click, and then the line went dead. Both calls had come in just around sunset, as the sky was getting darker and darker. The next day around sunset, 5:30 or so, Daryl heard the sound of John's car pulling into the driveway. He even saw the car's headlights shining on the house outside. But when he went to check the window, no one was out there. The whole experience was vividly real. It seemed that John's spirit was so attached to the idea of being alive that it was able to generate these brief slices of reality in which the crash had never happened. Daryl was visiting an animator friend of his. They both worked at a local animation studio making Saturday morning TV shows. Her name was Rebecca, and she was a cel painter. Daryl and Rebecca had become good friends at the studio and got together for coffee every few weeks. One evening, while he was visiting her place, the phone rang in the other room. Rebecca got up to get the call. She came back after a minute, looking very strange and thoughtful. "That was my grandmother. It's her birthday today." "Oh, that's nice. How is your grandmother?" Daryl asked. Rebecca looked at him with troubled eyes. "My grandmother died about 8 years ago. For several years now, she has called me on her birthday to say hello. That was her on the phone just now." Daryl didn't know how to react to that, except to reflect quietly to himself that many people must have similar experiences. He could see in her eyes and hear it in her voice that this didn't happen all the time, but when it did happen, it was just something to deal with. Ignoring it would tend to make it happen more often. So the method of dealing with it was just to accept the phone calls, however strange, and have the conversations. This was all either of them could do. And that was Phone Calls from the Dead from Rod in Los Angeles. And you can check out his podcast on Patreon. And again, it's Rod Matsui, RODDMATSUI, and Productions, Rod Matsui Productions. And this is a self-recorded story, and it's shared to us by Hollie in Oregon. It's called Gaseous Mist. And actually, Hollie had a cool idea. She's going to have an Anything Ghost party, theme party, and everybody's at the party's going to read ghost experiences they had, and they're going to record it. And then I think she wanted me to share it on Anything Ghost. Hopefully that was the idea. But either way, it sounds pretty cool. And again, this is from Hollie in Oregon.
Hi Lex, my name is Hollie and I'm in Oregon. Grew up in Vegas and spent a lot of time in Utah, but I've been living in Oregon for almost 14 years now. I was just listening to the most recent number 318, and somebody from Scranton, Pennsylvania mentioned that they saw an entity or something that was a gaseous looking mist type deal, and wondered if anybody else had seen something like that. My husband and I were out and we had taken a drive up to the second reservoir near us. There's a close reservoir in Sweet Home called Foster, and then there's a second one called Green Peter. And we moved up here, like I said, about 14 years ago, and we found out after we moved here that Green Peter was worked on by my husband's grandfather that he hadn't met very much of. So we thought that was an interesting little tidbit of family history that we hadn't known till we went there. But we're up near the dam. There's a little parking lot, and it's night, and it's pretty crappy weather, honestly. We were out just to get some parent time, have our kids already in bed, and we just went up there to have a moment to ourselves. And we're enjoying our solitude and quiet. There's no driving going by. There's very little housing up there, and if you're not up there by dark, you're probably not going up, so everybody gets home before dusk usually. So we're standing there in the parking lot talking, and we're just looking around. There's a tiny light, like one street lamp for this parking lot. There's no other light, and the van is off, and we're not like standing in the light or anything, so we're just standing in the dark, kind of just taking it in. It's beautiful. There's a sound of like the water behind us dropping down from the dam, and a little windy, not very much. I look over in the parking lot towards the trees, and I see something that's like reflecting the light differently, but not part of any structure or piece of something. So I look at my husband and I said, "Do you see that?" And as I did, it was moving, and I realized it was coming towards us and like a little bit around us, but then it started moving directly towards us, and it was, like she said, gaseous, almost liquidy looking. Like, I bet there's a alien movie that looks just like it, like an external something, like that movie Invisible Man that came out a while ago, that you can see kind of a difference, but you know you're looking at something, and you can see that it has a form. Like, it had a shape the size of me. I'm a 5'6" human, 5'6" human, so it was about the size of me. And I'm looking at it, and we're looking at each other and looking back at it and trying not to take our eyes off of it, and it walks or comes near us. There's no sound. It doesn't seem to be moving, and the wind is not like constant, so it's like a little gust here, 10 minutes, another gust, very low wind, and we're just quiet. Like, we don't want to interact anymore than maybe just like audio, visual, now that we're getting visual. So it comes up real close to me, and it seems like it's right in my face. Like, I feel like if I had breathed out, if I had been able to breathe, if I had breathed out, maybe it would have like gone against them. Maybe would have been able to see my breath, fog up whatever it's made of. And then it came over to my husband, and he has a light heart about most things. He just said, "Hi, how's it going? We're just out here enjoying the night. Is that what you're doing?" And we didn't, there was no response, of course, but it kind of stuck in the area, like it came out of his face area and moved away from our bodies and just stuck around within about 10-foot space. We can't even figure out where to begin on what that would be. But it was just like the person in Pennsylvania said. It was not a form, but it had mass. It had no shadow in the light. There was, like, we could see a little bit of our shadows, but there was nothing moving around us. There was not even a wisp of, like, when heat moves around and you can see the little bit of like heat movement and like a mirage kind of thing. That's not what we were looking at. We were looking at some kind of form. Something came close to us and moved away from us. It wasn't mist. But you could tell that the light was acting different once it was near it, or like once it hit the light and the light was being moved around or something. It was like gas or like mist, but it wasn't. So I've seen one too. So did my husband. And there's a few other things that people have said over the years that we've also experienced in different ways. Nothing ever correlates time-wise so far, or like location, because like I said, I've been in this area of the U.S. most of my life. So that was the one story I wanted to share so far. I have plenty more, Lex. Thank you so much for your podcast. It's been like 3 years of listening, and I'm re-listening to old episodes all the time. I really appreciate everybody sending in their stories and experiences. Hope you all take care.
And again, thank you, Holly, for that story, sending it in, and good luck with your Anything Ghost party. And this next story is from Tim in Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee. And he actually sent a story in episode, in 2022, episode, what was it, 294? And it was called Haunted House in Westmont. And he has another story, and he self-records them. And here's his story, and it's called Spirit Invitation.
Hi Lex. Hi Anything Ghost listeners. It's been a while since I submitted a story. This one happened in Jacksonville, Florida, around 2010, 2011. My best friend had started dating a woman from Savannah, Georgia, who was into all things paranormal and spooky. So one evening, they were talking about using a Ouija board. So they gave me a call and said, hey, do you want to come over, stop by and buy a Ouija board, and we'll play around with it? And I said, sure. Sounds like fun. So I did just that. I stopped by and we went outside, right outside his kitchen area, and proceeded to use the board. And for like 10 minutes or so, nothing happened at all. And so my best friends just pleaded, please, anybody talk to us. Show us you're there. Called out to any spirits, and sure enough, the board, the planchette started moving on the board. And we were super surprised. We really didn't expect that. And even though we wanted it to work, it still creeped us out that it did. So we ended up putting it back and just talking about it that evening. But after that, things started happening. In his in that area, around the corner, he kept a trash can, and it's physically impossible for this to happen. There was no high wind or anything like that. But that trash can ended up around the corner where the door is and just slammed against it while he was in the kitchen one day. And he couldn't figure out how that happened. Nothing can get in his backyard. He's got a pond back there and it's fenced off. And he just chalked it up to, it must be the ghost. He would literally hear spirits talk to him for quite a while. It was quite amazing. He would call me up and say, Tim, you would not believe this, but I have to turn it off. I have to tell them to stop, because for quite a while there, they were bothering him. And he is a very strong-minded person, and he had a way to just tell them, back off, stop, and they did. But in his house, there was still a lot of activity, and there was a lot of noise, a lot of things moving around and such. One time, I came by to just watch a football game with him, and we were sitting there, just the two of us in the house, and all of a sudden I hear, whap! A door slam. It was like an exterior door. And I'm looking around, and I could see all three exterior doors. And I looked at him and I said, that sounded like an outside door. And he looked at me and goes, come on, you know what it is. Kind of stuff happens all the time. Most of the activity seems to be upstairs. He's got like a man cave up there, and there's a lot of noise sometimes. He's married now to a different woman, and she doesn't like that sort of thing, so he kind of plays it down and doesn't really talk about it much. He never really told her about the little Ouija seance we had, but he'll come up with excuses like, oh, the house is settling and stuff like that, but it's obvious. It sounds like someone's walking up there, dropping stuff, that sort of thing. It's been happening for years now. I moved back to Chicago for a little while, and he came to visit me, and this thing has never been visible, or these things, whatever it is. But oddly enough, we were hanging out in Chicago, and his wife calls him up and says, "You're not going to believe this. I was sleeping, and a noise woke me up, and I looked up, and on the dresser, I could see what looked like a body laying there, and a face staring at me." And she said she slowly got up, and when she turned the light on, it was gone. But this woman doesn't like this sort of thing. She doesn't necessarily even believe in it. And it really took us by surprise, because we've only heard. We've never seen anything. We've only heard things. And of course, he's experienced the ghost actually talking to him. But it's pretty amazing. Like I said, it still happens to this day. We still talk about it. And it's kind of cool and it's kind of creepy at the same time. Well, I hope you enjoyed the story, and take care.
All right. Thank you, Tim. And just for the heck of it, I dug up the old story that he sent in back in 2022, and I'll just play that now. And it's about a haunted house in Westmont.
Hi, Lex. My name is Tim. I really enjoy the show, and especially the theme music. This story takes place in the early 90s. I moved from Tennessee to Chicago, where I'm originally from, and a lot of my friends from my childhood were living together and renting a house, and they were moving, so I thought I'd help them out and help them move their furniture and everything. So we moved from one house to the other into this suburb called Westmont. When we were finished moving everything in, we sat down on a couch in a love seat. I was sitting on a love seat with two other people, and adjacent to us was a couch where the rest of them were sitting, 4 or 5 others. And we were all just chatting, and I was listening to everyone talk, and I was looking across the room. From where we were sitting, there was a dining room and then a door to a kitchen. And in the kitchen, there was a breakfast nook, a door to the backyard, and then some stairs that went up to a room. So we were talking, I was just looking up, and in the doorway to the kitchen, I saw a shadow figure pop in and then pop out. And at the time I was wearing glasses, so I thought, well, maybe there was some kind of reflection or something on my glasses. And I was looking around me to try to see what it could have been. So I tilted them, and I proceeded to listen to everyone talk and stare at that doorway. And sure enough, a minute or so later, here comes the shadow figure popping in and popping out as if it was observing us. So at that point, I pointed my finger at the door and I said, "Someone's in the kitchen." And everyone looked at me like, "What? We're all here." And I said, "Seriously, someone's in the kitchen." So we all walked into the kitchen and searched. And there was no one in the breakfast nook. The back door was locked. Nobody upstairs. So everyone kind of shrugged their shoulders, laughed at me, and that was the end of that night. Well, a few weeks later, my friend Tom's girlfriend, who was living there, gave me a ring and said, "Tim, you're not going to believe what just happened." I said, "Well, what happened?" I figured maybe they heard noises, which they did. I found out later. They did hear some noises. But she said that she was in the kitchen and she saw someone in the backyard. So she opened the door, went back there and said, "Excuse me, can I help you?" And he said, "Well, I'm the former tenant and I'm just here to pick up my snowmobile." And she said, "Oh, I wondered who that belonged to." And she said, "I don't want to sound crazy, but," and he said, "Stop right there. Yes, the house is haunted." She didn't even get to say anything, and the man told her point blank, "Yeah, There's stuff going on there. And proceeded to tell stories of his brother coming to visit and not even lasting a couple days, even though he's supposed to stay a week because of all the activity there. At that point in my life, I always thought ghosts were white, like Casper sheet-looking things. So I'd never heard of a shadow figure at that point in my life. And, of course, now I hear all kinds of stories where it's described that way. So I wish that I've seen ghosts after that. I really would like to see that again. As a matter of fact, right now I'm living in a mansion that I take care of. And it's a historic mansion in Chicago, over 140 years old. And I actually listen to Anything Ghost many times when I'm here alone, walking, checking on the rooms and everything, and not a peep here. Maybe someday. Well, thanks for listening, and take care.
And thank you again, Tim, in Nashville, Tennessee, and Chicago, Illinois. Okay, I'm going to read an article from a 1903 newspaper. Interesting ghost. His nerves, shattered by a view of the famous ghost of Van Antwerp's woods near the Westchester County Club, Robert Fuller is suffering from hysteria and under the care of physicians at his home on Eastern Boulevard. Charles Willis and his wife, neighbors of the Fullers, also say they saw the ghost, and it was not until daylight yesterday morning that they turned out the lights in their house and sought repose. Fuller and his wife and Mr. and Mrs. Willis were sitting on the porch of the Fuller home Thursday night when they say the ghost appeared. It had the form of a woman, and they say its outline was distinct and ghastly. Mrs. Fuller screamed, and her husband, completely unnerved by the apparition, jumped from the porch, ran to the back of the house, and entering the back door, fell fainting in the kitchen. The Willises hurried into their home, lit every light in the house, and sat up until daylight. Mrs. Johanna Quinlan, who formerly lived in the house now occupied by the Willises, saw the ghost 5 years ago and was made insane. She is now in a sanitarium. Westchester tradition has it that the ghost is that of a woman servant who was employed by the Van Antwerp family 25 years ago. She was returning to the house late at night when she stumbled and nearly fell into a sunken well. She cursed the well, which was said to possess remarkable properties. A few days later, she disappeared, and the story since survived that she was murdered and her body was thrown into a pond near the well. Okay, so that was from 1903, and that must have been some scary-looking apparition. People going to insane asylums and such. But that's it for episode number 319 of Anything Goes. It's going to be a short show this time around, short episode. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone, for sending in your stories. If you want to share a ghost experience or local ghost legend, send it to lex@anythingghost.com. Have yourself a great week, and take care.